All right. Welcome everybody to today's session on Excel for analysis. This is the second in our four-part series on business tools that we are covering this month in September. So I'll be presenting this topic today, and you can see the other topics that we have covered that we'll be covering next week. If you haven't signed up for those, you can check those out or watch the video on our YouTube channel. So here's what we're going to cover today. I'm going to do a quick recap of session one. I know a lot of you were on the session on Monday. If you missed it, you can check the video out on our YouTube channel. Just a quick reminder of the things we covered. We talked about Excel, how it's part of the Microsoft suite along with Word and PowerPoint, similar to Google Sheets, but it is different. We're going to focus today's presentation on Excel. It's primarily used for analyzing financial information or organizing data. Rows and columns is the way to think about it. It could be financial, sales, marketing, operational, kind of any kind of data that you can get into a spreadsheet you can use Excel for. And really the objective in using Excel, it's not just to have the data in a spreadsheet. I like to advise people, try to turn that data into information and use that information to make decisions. If you remember, I talked last time about taking the what, turning it into so what, and turning it into now what. What do we have in our spreadsheet? What is it telling us? And now what are we going to do with it? And try to make a decision from it. Important aspect of creating a spreadsheet, you want to decide your format. What are you going to be using it for? What decision are you trying to make? Starting with the end in mind, thinking about what you want that picture to look like, and then figuring out how to organize and capture your data. So some examples might be, are you trying to prove a hypothesis? Maybe you're hoping to make more money than you're making already. Are you trying to use it for a business decision like creating a pricing model? Or are you just trying to organize data, maybe your product or sales listing or customer listing, to have it for reference in the future? And then the last thing I referenced last time was just capturing your data. The important aspect of doing that, ensuring you've got data integrity, whether you're importing the data or using it or putting it in manually or copying it from other sources, just ensuring that you've got data integrity. Some of the topics we covered last time on some of the specifics, we talked a lot about formatting, which is not just to make your data look pretty, but it's really about making it clean and organized in an effective way to review it quickly. Having your data set up the right way, you can quickly grasp answers or insights. So we talked about things like the column sizing and formatting some of the cells, whether it's a number or a date. We started doing some of the analysis. We talked about different calculations you can do, inserting rows and columns. We talked about diagnosing formula errors. If you get some formula error that looks really strange, and then your friend, the undo button, which is a nice tool to have where you can just automatically click that and it's going to undo what you previously did so you could figure out what may have gone wrong. And then we talked about copying and pasting and kind of, moving different formulas around. So today's topics, here's what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about some more calculations. I'm going to talk about something called reference point, which is important when you're trying to do different calculations of certain things. I'm going to do an example where I think that'll jump out at you. We're going to talk about how to sort data and then managing large spreadsheets. The ones that I was going through the other day were largely simple ones that I created, but we're going to talk about some managing some larger ones where you've got to use something called freeze panes. We're going to talk about filtering. We're going to create a pivot table. We're going to talk about how to find a data element in a large spreadsheet using the search function. And then we're going to do something called conditional formatting. And then we got a request at the last session to talk about break-even analysis, which I'll go through today, and hopefully that's helpful. So with that, I am going to switch over to Excel. We will jump right in. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do in Excel is want to talk a little bit more about some calculations. So if you remember last time, I created a sample product list for a business, and we were doing some calculations. We did some formatting. Here, we want to try to do a little bit more analysis, and we're going to talk about some formulas that can help you with that. So this is my product list. If you remember last time we mostly just formatted the columns and the formatting of the numbers and the dates, but I've got all my, different product categories, my year-to-date sales, and here I've got my price per unit and my cost per unit. So the first thing that I wanted to do was I said, well, what if I want to know what my profit per unit is? So here, as you're thinking about doing calculations in Excel, you want to make sure if you're adding or subtracting things that they are on the same basis. So for instance, if I want to look at my profit, I've got my year-to-date sales. That's everything I've generated in sales for across all of my sales for that one item. And then I've got my price per unit. So this is basically saying I'm selling this item for $75 and it costs me $23.25. So I'm going to calculate my profit per unit. I want to make sure that my sales price and my cost per unit are both on the same basis, which in this case is on a unit basis. So here I'm going to put in my my profit calculation, which is going to be my sales minus my cost. If I decide, hey, let's just create this for every single product, and I can calculate this down, I can copy and paste this down by doing my cut and paste formula, which I did last time. You may decide you want to calculate a gross profit percentage and say, how much am I earning per unit on a percentage basis? And on this one, I'm going to basically take my profit per unit, and I'm going to divide that by my sales price per unit. You can see it gives me a 0.69 number, and I want to turn that into a percentage point format. So I'm just going to format that as well. And then I could copy that all the way down as well. And what's nice about this is that you can get your products on both a dollar basis and a percentage basis in terms of gross profit. So sometimes people ask what's more important, dollars or percentages? And I would say it kind of depends, because both are important. But at the end of the day, you want to focus on your profit dollar basis, because I like to say you can spend dollars, but you can't spend percentages. You could have a really high percentage profit, but if it's on a low dollar value, that's not going to really add to your bottom line. So anyway, just an example of how you could do that. I'm going to delete this column right here, and I'm going to show something else. Let's say you wanted to, we're going to just label this gross profit per unit. Let's say you wanted to understand how much each of your sales are contributing to your total sales, each of your products. And you wanted to say what's the percentage of sales each of these products are contributing for my business? Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to determine what your total sales are. So in this example, I'm going to basically create a formula that says I'm going to take my sum formula that we used last time, and I'm going to add up all of my sales up above, and I'm going to calculate that. And now let's go calculate a percentage of sales, so I can say how much of each item is contributing to my sales. So I've got 16,560 in total sales. Let's take my first item here, and I'm going to divide it by my total sales. I'm going to say, great, this item is 11% of sales. And I'm going to go, okay, great, let me copy this formula down. And now I've got a problem. So I've got this divided by zero error, and you say, like, what is this? What does this even mean? Well, what Excel is telling you is that you are trying to divide something by zero, which is not possible. So it's giving you an error. And if I look at my formula, the first one is calculating my item here divided by my total. And when you copy the formula down, Excel is going to reference the same cell organization. And now it's going to take this, but it's dividing it by the next cell down, not your total. And you can see down here, same thing. So on the one hand, Excel is good in that it's going to keep that reference point the same. But if you're trying to divide by a static cell, that's not going to help you here. So there is a tool, a little tip you can do when you're trying to do this. And the way to do that is something called a reference point. Sometimes F4 is a function that can be used. I will say that this works a little bit differently for a Mac computer versus a Windows computer. So if I go up to my formula here, what I really want to do is I'm okay if Excel is going to move the formula to each of these numerators, but I really need this denominator to be fixed. So what you can do here is if you go up to this cell up here, and in a Mac, the function is function F4. And if you notice, what it did was it put a $ before the D and a $ before the 14. The $ means that reference point is now fixed. So my 11% hasn't changed, but if I copy this formula down, you'll see that it's calculated. And what it did was it changed it to D3, which it's picking up from here, but it fixed that total as my denominator. So now if I copy this all the way down, it's changing my numerator every time, but it's keeping my denominator the same, and that's exactly what we wanted. So that's a little trick to use if you're trying to do percentages of totals. Just put that $ in, and F4 is a good way to do it, or you can type the $ in yourself. Now, if you say to yourself, I want to test this and make sure that it's actually working, I can sum these percentages up. and you see I've got 100%. So therefore it's working. So one other trick you can do in data like this is if you said, hey, I want to understand my top sales items. If I wanted to sort that by largest sale, I'm going to delete these subtotals just so we don't, actually, no, that's fine. We can do that. So we're going to do a sorting exercise here. So what you want to do when you're trying to sort the data is you want to mark all your cells here. You can do that with your mouse, or you can use like the shift and arrow buttons. And these are the rows and columns that I want to sort. You go to your data formula here, and then you select sort. And this window is going to pop up, and it's basically going to say, what column do you want to sort it by? There's also an option here to check or uncheck this box that says my list has headers. So Excel is going to know to look for a header in the top row. And if I say that, yes, I've got headers, when I select my column, it's going to give me the column names to sort by. And I want to sort it by year-to-date sales. And then it's going to give you an order. Do you want to order it by smallest to largest? We're going to go largest to smallest. And now you can see that it's sorted all of the data associated with each one of these products by year-to-date sales. So just be a little careful when you're doing this. You don't want to include your totals in your sorting, or else that is going to be mixed in the middle of it. So just mark the rows and columns that you want to use to sort that section there. So hopefully folks find that helpful. So the next thing we're going to talk about is if you're trying, we talked last time about doing a pricing model. And in this instance, I wanted to try to use different pricing models. So I created one last time, but now I think maybe I want to try different solutions, different sensitivities, and see what business outcome that would be. So I've got my tab here. If you remember last time, we created this tool or this spreadsheet where we had our sales price and our total revenue and our costs and total costs per item. And then we calculated our gross margin and our gross margin percentage. And then we calculated total profit. And you think, okay, this is a pricing and projection model. But you think, well, what if I wanted to try a different scenario? What might it look like? So what we're going to do here is we're going to actually now copy and paste large sections of data. And I want to show you kind of what that does when you do it. So we're going to just mark this section here. And I want to create the same table below this with the same structure, but I want to be able to play around with some of the variables just so I can see what the different outcomes would be. So if you copy this whole section and we hit, our edit copy, and then we scroll down a little bit, and we're going to just get some room down here, and then we're going to go edit paste. And you can see what it's done is it's created the same table. Now, one thing to keep in mind is we had a bunch of formulas up here. So you can see we were calculating revenue. And you remember we had our sales price that we referenced back to the previous sales price, so we could change it once and it would change it for all of the months. So all these formulas are intact for the first section, and down in the second section, it's actually replicated it in the new structure. So now my revenue is referencing this new scenario. So I could change these inputs, and I'm going to calculate my total revenue. So you think, all right, this is great. I'm going to start playing around with this. And then you notice that you lost your labels for your months. You can't see them anymore because you've added some rows. So this is a point to bring up a tool called freeze panes. We talked a little bit about this on Monday. So this is an important one. Whenever you get rows and columns that are beyond your immediate viewing area, this is a tool that I use all the time. Kathleen mentions last time she does as well. You're going to go to your view section here. You want to select the cell where you want the rows and columns to be frozen, and you click on freeze panes. And if you're going to notice, it's going to put a solid line in vertically and horizontally where your panes have now been frozen. If you do it, I'm going to undo that. I'm going to click my undo button. If you go too high, you notice that I can't see my month heading because I picked a cell that was above here. But if we go here and we click freeze panes, now you can see I can scroll down and I can still see my month headings. This will come in handy as well. I froze it here because if I start adding more columns over to, like, say, extend this to 12 months, I can move across and I can still see my column headings over here. So freeze panes is a great tool. And if you decide that you want to unfreeze it, just click the unfreeze button. Super easy to use.
So one of the things that if you're trying to do a different pricing scenario, if you're trying to do a different pricing scenario is if you say, all right, let me think what if I wanted to lower my price and maybe that'll help me sell more. So I'm going to lower my price now to $99. So you notice I changed that first cell and all these other ones changed because they were all using the reference formula we created last time. And if I lowered my price, maybe I'm going to sell more. So maybe I'm going to just assume that I'm just typing in some numbers here. Maybe I'm going to be able to sell a little bit more. My cost hasn't changed. I'm just lowering my price point. And now I can say, all right, well, now I can see what my new revenue is, and I can see what my new cost is, my new gross profit, my new gross margin. Now, you could scroll up and down and you could kind of look at these and see, well, my profit is going to be, my revenue was 93.60. If I lower my price and I sell an extra 20 units over the course of 6 months, my revenue only goes up to 97.02. Do I really think I can sell? Maybe I can sell more. Maybe I'm not sure. So these are kind of different things you could play around with. You could also look at your gross profit per shoe, right? Your gross profit on a dollar basis goes down from $65 to 44. Your gross margin goes down to 44%. But you could say, am I making more or less profit? In this instance, I'm making less profit. So I would probably have to sell a lot more than 98 shoes to justify that price decrease. So the other thing that you could do in a spreadsheet like this is you could say, well, all of these formulas are interesting, but I kind of want to focus on just a few metrics. Can I get rid of some of the noise and just focus on like revenue and profit? Well, there's a way you can do that by hiding rows. And the easiest way to do that I've found is, let's say I wanted to just show revenue. Let's say I want to show sales price, number of sold in revenue, and profit. And I want to hide all this stuff. What you can do is you can click over here and you can mark the entire row. You can see how this entire row is shaded here. And then we're going to mark all of these right here. And if you right click, there's an option you can insert, you can delete, you can clear all the data, or you can hide it. So I'm going to hide those columns right now. They're still there. You haven't deleted anything, but you can hide them. And then I'm going to do the same down here such that I want to just get these out of the way just so I can see things a little bit clearer. And now I can kind of just say, okay, I've hidden all that stuff. Now I can maybe I could play around with my sales price and my number of sold units, and my profit is going to automatically calculate. I've hidden the formulas that are doing it, but it's going to calculate automatically. So this is kind of a nice tool, being able to hide and unhide rows that you don't need to see all the time. To know if you've got rows hidden, you can see over here, there's this dark green line, and you can also see that the cells go from row 12 to row 20. That's telling that you've got hidden rows. Same thing down here. I'm going from 27 to 35. If you want to unhide the rows, you can just mark the rows above and below. You right click, unhide, and they're there. You could also do this with columns as well. It's the same, works the exact same way. So that's just another way you can do that. If you start to get some spreadsheets that are getting a little bit bigger, but you want to be able to just focus in on kind of a few rows or columns, you can use the hide and unhide features. So that's what we've covered in some of the more simpler things. These are all spreadsheets that I created to help demonstrate a few things. The next few items, we're going to talk about some larger spreadsheets. I got some sample spreadsheets off internet, just off just some kind of Excel sites, just to demonstrate what you would do when you're trying to use some large data. Freeze panes would be a great tool in something like this. So this is a spreadsheet that is showing sales data. You can see there's these column headings going across. We've got kind of some location. We've got a product. We've got how many units we sold, what the sales price was, gross sales, profit, the date, the month, the year. You've got it. There's, a bunch of columns, and you think, all right, how many rows of data do I have? I'm just going to scroll down real quickly. Oh my God, I got hundreds of rows of data. What am I going to do with all this? Well, the first thing I might want to do is freeze panes, just so I can okay, now I can at least see what is going on there. I'm not going to freeze any columns yet because I'm not really sure what I'm going to use. But one thing that you can do that is a great tool when you've got data like this is applying filters. So filters are very easy to use. We are going to go to our data tab, and you click on this filter icon right here. And you notice that it's applied these little arrows to each of the rows. So what this does is this allows you to select certain categories, and it'll only show you the data for those categories. So for instance, if I want to show, if I click on this arrow and you can see all these check marks, this means that everything has been applied. It is showing every row. Now, if I just want to show sales for Canada, I'm going to uncheck select all. I'm going to show Canada. Now, what you can see is three things to know that your filters applied. One is down here, there's a little note that says 140 of 700 records found. So that means there's 140 rows with the word Canada in it. The second is you can see this little filter. Instead of an arrow, we now have this filter. This means that your filter is on and it's applied. You can also see that these rows are kind of highlighted in blue, and you can see that the numbers don't go in order. This is just a good way for you as you're looking at spreadsheets and you think data may look weird. Ask yourself, are there any filters applied? And you can see using those tools that they are applied. So let's say I'm over here and I'm like, okay, cool. I want to see, sales in Canada. And let's also pick this product. We're going to pick the Paseo product. And now I can kind of see, all this data for these, this filtered information, and I can see what I want to do. Filters are really good when you've got a handful of categories with a lot of data under each category. So for instance, you wouldn't want to use a filter for gross sales, because I'm going to pick gross sales here. And you can see gross sales is such a unique figure and data point that you're not going to want to go pick, because you're probably only going to have one item show up for a gross sale. Let's see if that works. Yeah, so you can see there's only one item. So that's not going to really be meaningful. You want to think about using filters where you've got a lot of, a handful of categories under with a lot of data elements underneath it. So we're going to undo our filters right now. We're just going to select all so that everything's reset. And now you can see all those blue lines are gone. I don't have any warning down here about how many rows are found, and all my filters are now arrows. So my filters are now unset and everything is fine. So another tool you can use with a spreadsheet like this is something called a pivot table. Now, these are, it's a nice way to basically gather data with a lot of different dimensions. So you could, if you say to yourself, hey, I want to add up my gross sales and profit for this spreadsheet, but I got 700 rows of data. I don't know how to do it. And I'd kind of like to see it by segment and country and maybe by product. How can I do that? Like, you can't just put a sum formula in at the bottom. That's going to be kind of confusing. So what a pivot table does is it creates multi-dimensional summations as an example. So we're going to create one right now. So if we go over to insert, there's a little icon here that says pivot table. It's going to pop open a dialog box. It's going to let you you can select the data that you want to pick from. This is defaulting to all the numbers in the spreadsheet because it's formatted that way. It's going to I would recommend populating the pivot table in a new worksheet, not the existing worksheet, but you'll see why in a second. If you try to put it in this existing worksheet, it may kind of mess things up. So we're just going to hit OK, and it's going to create a pivot table. You can see it creates it in a new sheet. And now over here, what I've got is I've got some fields. And now I can pick which fields from my data I want to include in my pivot table. So let's say I want to see segment, and I want to include country, and I want to see gross sales, and I want to see profit. And those are the data elements I want to see. So now what you do down here is it's got your items in here. It's got the 4 items that you've selected. And now what you do is you kind of pick and choose how you want to organize this data. So I decide that I want to have my segment, which is in this one right here. I'm going to drag it over here. I want a segment in rows. And then I want it organized by country. So I like that. I got segment, and then I got country. And then I've got my sales and my profit. That's pretty cool. I like that. I wonder if there's anything else I should do. Maybe I should add product too. So I'm going to add product. Where do I want product? Maybe I'll put product up in columns. So now what I've got is I've got segment, country, and I've got my products going across here, and I've got sales for my products, and then I've got profit for my products. I think, all right, maybe that'll be pretty good. But maybe profit is probably making this too busy. I'm going to remove the profit one. I just right click and click remove field. Now I've just got my sales. Let's start with something simple. I've got my channel partners here, right? I've got my channel partners and enterprise. Then these are my different segments. And then underneath each segment, I've got each of my locations, my geographies. And then going across here, I've got my gross sales. I've got my label up here. It says sum of gross sales. That looks pretty good. Then you decide, well, what if I wanted to see it organized by country first and then segment? You can just drag country up first. Now it's organized by country first, then segment underneath it. So you can see that with a tool like a pivot table, if you've got your data organized and you've got your filters set up, you can create some pretty dynamic spreadsheets here. And let's say you decide that you want this to, be kind of this is the format you want. You can mark all this data. Remember how I'm hyper about keeping the data organized. We're going to put columns in. We're going to get rid of the pennies. Look at that. Now, all of a sudden, I've got a nice clean spreadsheet that is three-dimensional, right? It's got it organized by channel, country. It's got it organized by country, segment, and each of the different product lines. And the data element inside each of these is sum of gross sales. If you decided that you wanted that to be profit and not sales, you can unclick gross sales and just click profit. And there you go. Your profit's there. So pivot tables are it takes a little while to get used to them. I'm still learning these over the years, but they can be a really powerful tool when you're working with a lot of data to try to figure out how to analyze it. So next on the list, we're going to talk about conditional formatting. So this is a spreadsheet of employee data. This is just made up names and data. You can see we've already got our freeze panes applied. We've already got our filters applied. But let's say you're looking at this data and you say, okay, how many rows do I have? Wow, I got another like several hundred rows of data. This is insane. How am I gonna analyze this? And let's say you get a phone call from someone who says, hey, we've got some concern that we could have some employees who could be at risk because they're on the low end of the salary range for their market and their department. Can you get me a list of people who are in IT, in the Midwestern geography, who are making less than $60,000? You think, okay, how am I going to do this? Well, I've got data. I'm going to go filter on my IT employees. Now I'm down to 241 people. I'm going to filter on geography. Let's go pick some Midwestern. Who do I have in the Midwest? I've got Austin. I've got Chicago. I've got Columbus. I still have got 80 people. All right, how am I going to figure out who is at risk here? Well, one thing you could do is you could do something called conditional formatting. So this is a way where you can basically say, I'm going to go grab my annual salary column here, and I'm going to select an conditional formatting. And there's multiple ways you can do this. This is just kind of an easy one. So conditional formatting basically says, based on certain data criteria, we're going to highlight certain cells. So I'm going to go to this highlight cells rules, and I'm going to pick less than. And now I'm going to say, I want to calculate any cell value that is less than 60,000. I'm going to click OK. And now I've got some employees who are highlighted. And now I can quickly go find the handful of employees that are highlighted. And that would jump out pretty quickly. So that's one way you could do it. You could sort the data if you wanted to. That's another way to do it. But this is just a way that you could apply the conditional formatting quickly, put a rule in, it'll highlight certain data points. Another thing you can do is, let's say your data is all organized. I'm going to hide my filters here or reset my filters. We're going to turn off our conditional formatting. So all my filters are cleared now. Let's say you're trying to find an employee and the data is not organized by last name. It's organized by department or numerical sorting. One thing you can do is you can do a search. So Command F is a search. You can see that I pressed Command F, or you can sometimes Control F would work. And you can see there's a box that just popped up here. And let's say I'm trying to find someone with the last name of Smith. And you can see the pointer automatically jumped to Audrey Smith because it found that label in that name. And let's say I'm trying to see if there's another Smith there. It looks like Audrey Smith is the only one there. So that's just a way you can use the find key if you're trying to do that. You can just do the kind of Control F. You can see the instruction up there. It says search sheet. So that's something you can do. So I think that's everything we've got on this one. There's another type of conditional formatting that I want to show you in this risk analysis tab. So this is something that Kathleen created and sent over to me yesterday, so we could show this. So this is a really good tool. We've been talking a lot about financial, operational data, sales data. You can also use Excel for something like project management. And one of the things that's nice about conditional formatting is you could put in some kind of qualitative data and it'll give you a numerical score. And one of the formats that you can use is a red, yellow, green stoplight format, which is what this spreadsheet is. So this is a risk analysis that we're doing for our project, and we've got the risks listed as to what could go wrong. It's got organized by department, and then we've got a prevention and mitigant section in here for each of these. And so this could be an instance where you've got a project list and you've got a number of things, and you're trying to figure out what are the things I'm most worried about, or what should I be most worried about? I've got this, example has, 7 or 8 different risks. You could have 30 risks on a project. This could be a way for you to do risk management assessment for your business, thinking about all the risks that are out there. You could do a scoring method, and the scoring method could help determine where you should focus your attention. So what we did in this one was if you notice, each of these cells here has a green stoplight next to it. So the formula we created here was we said, we're going to calculate a weighted score of the risk of this project risk and what we think it might mean. And what we set up here is we're going to scale these. We're going to score these based on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest risk and 1 being the lowest risk. And the weighted score is going to multiply the likelihood times the impact. So you say to yourself, all right, well, what's the purpose of the red, yellow, green? What we're going to do here is if you look at, I'm going to go up to conditional formatting and I'm going to select manage rules because we've already created this one. And you can see we have this thing called an icon set. And an icon set is this red, yellow, green stoplight. And I just double clicked on it to show what the formatting we had set up here. You can do different styles for these kind of risks. You can do kind of a different scale or a data bar. The red, yellow, green is this icon set. And you can see what we've done here is we've said we're going to set up our risks or our risk assessment to say, if the value is greater than equal to 16, I'm going to show red. If it's less than, or if it's greater than equal to 8, I'm going to show yellow. And if it's less than 8, I'm going to show green. So those are the parameters that I set up. So now what you can do is I'm going to click OK because my risk is all, my conditional formatting is all set, my formula. So here what we're going to do is we're going to say, all right, let's try to score these risks. Now, this is just a pretend project, so we're just going to make up some numbers. But let's say the first risk is budget is not properly managed or costs escalate. We're going to put that as a 3 because that actually could happen in a project. The impact is probably pretty high. We're going to call that a 5. So now what you can see is that if I take that 3 times the 5, it gave me a weighted score of 15, and it turned that icon to yellow. So that's kind of in my yellow zone for risks. Pricing analysis underestimates the costs. Well, I'm not really worried about that one. I think they've done a good job. So we're going to call that a 2, but the impact might be 4. So that's also going to be yellow. Social media costs exceed budget. That's probably going to happen because they have a hard time hitting their budget, but it's a small budget. So we're going to call the impact of that 3. So maybe that's a weighted average score of 5. So you can see how this would work. And let's say we've got, for some reason, we feel this risk is really high. We're going to call this one 4. Its likelihood of the impact will be 5. You can see that now I've chipped over that 16 threshold that I had, and now I've gone to 20, and it's turned the stoplight to red. So this is kind of a way for you to, if you've got a large inventory of items that you're trying to analyze, you could use a lot of this conditional formatting, and then it can give you an answer where you can have quickly organized data to say what's red that I got to worry about, what's yellow that I got to keep in the back burner, what's green I don't need to worry about. You could also use this as a way to update from time to time, or if you're working on something big and things are moving week to week, every Friday you could update your risk assessment, for instance, and say, how do I feel about this red, put in my likelihood and impact and do kind of a red, yellow, green. You could also use a format like this on managing your sales pipeline. If you've got like a whole customer list and you say every Friday,
I'm going to try to update how I'm feeling about my sales, pipeline. And maybe that can help influence you where you want to focus your attention on the next few days to help close some leads. So just a different way to use Excel in more of a qualitative aspect, but using some of those quantitative features. So we got a question last time about a break-even analysis. I came up with an example that I want to share with folks. I did want to make sure that we were talking about the same thing. So sometimes when people are talking about break even, they mean net cash flow positive for their business. That's something different. That is basically, when do you start making more than spending more in a startup business? Break even is really used mostly in retail and manufacturing, but it's really about, how do I think about how many items I need to sell when I take into account my selling price, my variable costs, and my fixed costs before I'm actually going to break even and start making even more money. And I get beyond that 0 point. So I've got two examples here that I'm going to share with you. The first is just a graphical one that we've used in other workshops that we've done in the past. So the example on how this one works is, let's say you have a business that has a unit price of $225. So every time they sell something, they sell it for $225. And it costs them $100 to manufacture it. That's their variable costs. And the fixed costs to run their business are $75,000. So what do these lines mean? Well, the blue line is the simplest to figure out, because basically the way this spreadsheet works is your dollars of your dollars are over here on the left, and over here on the bottom, going across the horizontal axis, is how many units you're selling. So your fixed costs, you can see in this bottom table, are $75,000, because no matter how many items you sell, your fixed costs are fixed. They're always going to be $75,000. So you can see how that's staying static over the life period of how many units you sell. Now, if you sell 0 units, you have 0 in sales. Your total costs are $75,000 because you have $75,000 of fixed costs, and you have 0 of variable costs because you haven't sold anything yet. So now we go up to 300 units and we say, okay, now what do we have for 300? Well, we sold for $225 times 300 is $67,500 in sales. I've got variable and total costs of $105,000. So that represents my fixed costs plus the variable component of the units that I've sold. But you can see that my total costs are 105,000, but my sales are 67.5. So I'm actually losing money still, because my costs are more than my profit or my sales. And you can see what happens here is, when we get up to 600 units, I'm selling 135,000 and my variable and total costs are 135,000. So we've now reached the point where I'm selling enough such that my gross profit, that $125 per unit, is equal to my 75,000, such that I've now hit my break-even point. So this is a graphical way to show this. And you can see now, as we go beyond the 600, my sales are now exceeding my costs. And I'm now in a much better position, because I've now achieved what we call fixed cost leverage by overcoming my fixed costs by having enough gross profit. So how do you calculate this? Well, I created a simple example on this next spreadsheet. And what you want to do here is, there's a handful of items that you're going to need for this, just a few pieces of information. Like I said, it mostly applies to retail and manufacturing. You could try to do this for the service industry. It's a little trickier, but let's keep it simple. Here's the information you need. You really need to think about, what are the fixed costs you need to run your business. I like to think about it for the year. Think about how much it costs you per month, multiply by 12, or do a budget and think about your costs over the course of 12 months. You need to understand your variable cost per unit of product and your sales price per unit of product. These can be kind of tricky to figure out. In terms of categorizing your costs, ask yourself your question. If the cost varies with how much business you sell, it's variable. If not, it's fixed. There are some gray areas where you think like, well, the more business I have, I might need to hire an extra person. Well, think about that as a fixed cost. Your variable costs are really going to be attributed to like the production or the acquisition of something that you're reselling. So in our example here, I've determined that my fixed cost for the year are $48,000.
My variable cost per unit of product is $46. I'm going to sell it for $129.99, and my gross profit is $83.99. So the simple way to calculate how much what your break-even number of units is to take your fixed costs and divide it by your gross profit. So gross profit per unit. So what I've done here is I've taken my fixed costs of 48,000 and I've divided it by my 83.99 of gross profit per unit. So now I say to myself, all right, well, do I believe that number? This basically says I need to sell 571 units to break even. Well, let's prove out the math and make sure that we're thinking about this the right way. So I've created a little sample calculation over here where I'm basically saying, I'm going to create a calculation that says, depending on how many units I sell, starting with 100 up to 700, I'm going to calculate my revenue, costs, and my profit. So let's just create the formulas. So what's my revenue? Well, it's going to be, I'm going to take my 100 units times my sales price per unit, and that is my revenue. My variable costs are going to be my 100 units times my variable cost per unit. And my fixed costs are going to be what they are because we know they're $48,000. And now my profit is going to be my revenue minus my variable costs minus my fixed costs. You can see if I only sell 100 units, I'm going to lose $39,601. So you think, okay, well, let's try to see what happens if I sell more units, how we're going to do this. So now we're going to use our little cheat sheet or our little tip before on using that reference point calculation, because if I copy this formula over, you can see now I'm picking up 200 units, but I'm not picking up my sales price per unit. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to I want to fix that sales price formula at E21. And I'm going to copy this over now. And now I can see what my sales revenue is going to go up depending upon how many units I sell. Variable costs, I'm going to go do the same thing. I want to fix that E20. Fixed costs, I'm going to fix that at E18 because we want the same number. My profit calculation is going to be picking up each of these and each one. So I want to copy that over because that is going to be referencing everything above. I'm going to copy these over. So now you can see what happens. Well, if I sell 200 units, I'm going to make 300,000 or 31. I'm going to lose 31,000. Sorry. 300, I'm going to lose 22, 400, lose 14. And you can see as each of these numbers go up, your sales revenue and variable costs are all going up because you're selling more business volume. But notice your fixed costs are staying the same. So now you can notice that when we get between 500 and 600, we flip to a profit once we get to 600. There's your 571 units. So if I were to actually literally put in 572 units, you can see I would make $42. So that's my break-even point. So this is a way to just kind of depict how you want to calculate this. I'm doing a very simple explanation, but that's a way to think about how to calculate the break-even analysis. So with that, I'm going to switch back over to the PowerPoint. And then we can move on to Q&A. All right, Kathleen, do we have any questions? Or if anybody has any questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A box.
We do. And one, I had it as a list of something to bring up anyway, which is Sarah wants to know if you can add a filter to sort by conditional formatting. But what I was going to suggest is showing how to do a custom built filter using either that sales spreadsheet or the other one that you had after the sales spreadsheet.
Ooh, we are stumping the band now, aren't we?
I know how to do it if you can't remember, because I used to use this all the time.
All right, I'm going to have you walk me through it because I'm not sure if I followed exactly what you mean. So you want to go to the sales data?
Yeah, the one of the two that had a lot of data in it.
Yep.
Okay, and then already has the filter. So see where you could do conditional formatting, and you could look for anything where the gross sales are more than $50,000 or something like that. But your other choice is to, in the filter column in H, is click on the filter and then see where it says if you want to build a filter. you can say,
Right here.
yes, greater than
Ah, you're right.
50,000.
Look at that. I like it. I just learned something new. Yep, there you go. So you could, yeah, you could customize your filter. Yep, that's great.
And then once you have the filter data, you could sort, but you're going to want to be able to remember to undo all that, because when you unfilter, then it's going to be sorted in a strange way.
Yeah, and the sorting, I like the filter tool a lot because it it allows you to kind of play around with the data, but you're not manipulating the data, you're just hiding things, or you're showing only certain things, you're not hiding things. The sorting function is good. The problem is you have to be careful how you're sorting the data. Because, for instance, if you don't mark all the columns and you only sort some of the columns, you know, that data is going to get sorted, but some of the other data won't. And then your data is going to be misaligned. And you sometimes you also want to just go back to how it was originally. So the filter option is a really good one. That's a great question.
The next question is, can you add formulas within a pivot table, such as adding a sum formula per country being served?
That is a good question. I'm not an expert at pivot tables, but I'm sure there is a way to do that.
I am not either, so I don't know how to answer that question either.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I bet there
I've never
is.
seen anybody do it, but it doesn't mean it's impossible.
Yeah, so adding a sum formula per country being
I can
served.
Google it if you want while you're
Well,
answering the next
well, I
question.
mean, what you've got in the pivot table here is, so for in that example, where we organized it by country, then by segment, your total by country is actually displayed here. So you can actually see that at the top. It puts the totals at the top of the row. So if I just double check this here, that should be the 6. Yeah. So I think that's what you're asking. And
Well,
it's
what if
putting,
you wanted an average? I mean, that was just an example, but what if you wanted an average?
yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. Look
I'm
at
gonna
that.
Google it.
Look at that. So check this out. So if you click on sum of profit, what it's defaulting to is the sum, but you can click on average and it just changed to average of profit. So if you click down on the values button here, um, you know, there's all sorts of different options here.
Ah,
So that's pretty neat. Yeah, so the default right now is it's giving you the total for each of the segments by country, and then it's also giving you the total for each country for all segments combined. And then your row at the very bottom has got all the countries added up. Or yeah, all the countries and segments and everything added up for a grand total. I think we saw a question about filtering a pivot table,
yes, that's the next one.
which you can do. It's kind of created some defaults here where I could click on the arrow here and just show this one if you wanted to do something like that. So yes, it does do that. There's also a filter option up here where you can kind of move some of these around. I don't really know what that does when I do that. Looks like it's oh, here you go. So what this is doing right now is what I've done is instead of showing all the countries, I'm showing the segments and by product, but I'm showing all the products or all the countries added up. But let's say you wanted to filter it and only show France. Now it's going to just show France. So that's actually making the data element a filter instead of having it be part of the pivot table. But if I wanted to just reset that, let's say I wanted to go back to where we were before, I'm going to drag that data element from filter down back down to my rows, and I'm back to where I was just before. See, these last few things that I've done, I am completely learning on the fly just by playing around with it and experimenting. I did not know how to do that 10 minutes ago. So this just goes to show you that if you play around with these things, especially pivot tables, you can actually learn a lot on how to display your data pretty quickly.
There's another question that says, is there any way to scale back the break-even analysis to determine the lowest price point to sell a product?
Yes, you could do that. The way to do that would be you would change the dimensions that you would pivot on, not meaning pivot table. So for instance, instead of the variable being how many units you were going to sell, you got to fix either the price point or the number of units sold. I guess it's kind of hard to figure out. Yeah, there
I guess
is
you
a way
could
to
kind
do
of do
that.
both, couldn't you? Couldn't you do
Yeah,
it both ways?
you'd have to play around with it. At the end of the day, what you're trying to figure out is how much in gross profit do I need to achieve to cover my $48,000 in fixed costs? One way you could do that is something that basically has like you could do a table where you did something like this. I don't know if this is going to work. Let's say you did a table that says number of units sold going across. I am making this up. I don't know if this is going to work. And you did kind of your price point going down the side. And let's say your price point was, I want to make this so it actually works. Yeah, let's do this. So let's say that I'm going to create a price point that is going to be somewhere between $80 and $160. And I'm going to sell anywhere from 100 to 700 units. This will basically calculate what my revenue is in any of these scenarios. Why didn't that work? Oh, maybe I picked too big of a number. Oh, because I didn't use my hold on, please. I didn't use my my correct thing here. So we're gonna do that and that. Let's see if that works. It's not working. Why didn't I do that right? Oh, it's picking up the
You
wrong.
want to freeze only
yeah.
the
Yeah, I wanna freeze. I gotta freeze. Oh.
G, not H.
I want to freeze the column. I want to freeze my column. I want to anchor my column and I want to anchor my row in that one, right? Did that work? That didn't work.
No, you want to anchor the row in H. So that it always goes for row 14.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're right. I have that backwards.
And then anchor G, the column for the other one.
That worked.
Yeah.
Only took me 5 tries.
Yeah.
So what I tried to do here was I basically said, if I gave myself different revenue scenarios based on how many units I sold between 100 and 700, and what my price point was between 80 and 160, this would basically tell me, here's what my calculated revenue would be. And what you could do is you could say, all right, for my fixed costs, one scenario might be somewhere in this kind of sweet spot right up here of, if I sold 400 units at $120, that's where I would cover my fixed costs. That's where I achieve my break point. That's just revenue though. That's not taking into account variable costs. So you could do something like this where you try to anchor on both the units sold and the price point. Maybe what you would do here is you would calculate your gross profit per unit and use that as one of the variables. But there's a way to do that where you can kind of figure out where your sweet spot is in terms of your price point and your number of units sold. Because the dynamic with this is that the more you lower your price point, in theory, the more units you should sell. So you've got 2 variables moving at the same time. So it's a little tricky to calculate. I hope that helped. That took a lot longer than I anticipated.
If not, feel free to ask a follow-up question.
Yes.
The last is a statement, or no, it is a question. Mr. Steve, were you a math teacher?
No, I was not a math teacher, but I spent most of my career in accounting and finance and all around spreadsheets a lot of my career. So I tell my clients that my brain works in rows and columns. It's just how my brain works. So, but thank you for the compliment. Assuming
And
that
we got a comment back. Yes, it was a compliment. You got several compliments, and that did clarify. So that explanation was excellent.
okay, good. Yeah, and so what you can see just with these last few questions that I was doing is I was kind of just playing around with different ways to do things. That formula problem I was having was that we were trying to anchor our rows and columns using that dollar sign. I was just picking the wrong rows and columns to anchor. But what you can find, like what I was doing with that pivot table, is if you play around with this stuff enough, not only are you going to be able to find the right solution or different solutions, but you're actually going to learn Excel better. That's how I've learned this stuff. A week ago, I really did not know how to do pivot tables, but I just played around with it a lot until I could figure out how to do it for today. It's been something that I've used a little bit in the past, but never that much. So that's really the headline for today. And really both of these classes is, as you're thinking about working with Excel, you can find a lot of help online. There's YouTube videos. If you search what you're trying to figure out, the help menu is pretty good. If you're trying to figure something out, but a lot of the way you can learn the most is really to play around with yourself. And the more you use it, the more reps you get with it, the more experience you'll get and the better you'll get at it. So do we have I'm not seeing any other questions.
Nope.
All right. So I think we will turn off the recording in a second here. But before we do, just a reminder, if you're interested in learning more about SCORE or getting a mentor, you can go to score.org. You can find how to get a mentor there. You can also search for other workshops that we have. And if you liked this video, we have many more on our YouTube channel. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and you'll be notified of future webinars. And with that, I think we can, one more thing we did want to do a poll before we wrap up to see if you'd like any mentoring help. Kathleen, if you wouldn't mind launching that. Forgot that. And just to recap, if you're interested in learning more about how to use Excel, you can check out a lot of online resources. And as I mentioned, the help menu is pretty good in Excel. If you search in that kind of help menu about what you're trying to do, it can be a pretty big help for you. And again, thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate all the feedback and the questions. Be sure to sign up for next week's sessions, next Monday and next Wednesday. You'll get an email link tomorrow with a recording of today's session, and you'll also see links to register for Monday and Wednesday sessions of next week if you haven't already done that. And once again, if you liked this video, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we will see you next time.